So Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries.
But this particular president is actually not corrupt.
I'm not going to demand any apology from anybody. What I'm demanding is the return of assets.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
The intellectual capacity of the president is protozoan.
Can you really lay out the red carpet for someone who has talked about grabbing women by the
I think about a man who thinks it's okay to go and grab.
Tout le monde nous disait que c'était impossible.
Everyone said it was impossible.
Mais ils ne connaissaient pas la France.
They didn't know France.
Legend has it that 1 out of every 7 black people on the planet is a Nigerian. Now, while that at best is an assumption, the senior special assistant to the President on Foreign Affairs and the Diaspora, Abike Dabiri-Eriwa, says there are currently about 15 million Nigerians in various parts of the world. That's more than Denmark, Singapore and Jamaica put together. In 2016, these Nigerians sent $35 billion home, the highest remittance in the whole of Africa and the 6th largest in the world. It's no news the Nigerians in diaspora are reputed to be among the leading lights in virtually every field of human endeavor. But how have they fared in the light of Nigeria's dwindling global image? And how directly have they been affected by Nigeria's foreign policy? That's our focus this week on the Global Arena. Thank you for joining us. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Welcome back. We'll begin with a review of the incessant xenophobic attacks in South Africa, where sources say up to 116 Nigerians have been killed in the past 2 years. Though the dust appears to have settled, the horrifying memories typify the harrowing experience of many Nigerians in diaspora who suffer various degrees of maltreatment around the world. The welfare of Nigerians living outside the country remains a concern amidst incessant attacks, deportation and discrimination. The unending xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa has recorded an unimaginable destruction of homes and businesses. Reacting to the attack in its wake earlier in 2017, Nigerians in diaspora say government hasn't done enough to protect them. They claim government only engages in diplomatic negotiations and reconciliation without putting any mechanism in place to prevent a future recurrence.
Why are they discriminating and doing that to Nigeria alone? It is because our government is weak. Our government do not protect us. You don't protect us. You have come and have teas and dinners and the lunch with them, and they massage you and they are going back. I promise you, this problem is going to continue. And if you cannot stop your foot very strong, and they continue to massage South Africa, we are not protected. You need to stand up and do something.
The intervention of the National Assembly back at home to the February attack was not without its own measure of drama. For days, both chambers of the National Assembly could not agree on the composition of a team from the legislature to visit South Africa. While the House of Representatives preferred to go alone, the Senate reportedly pushed for the composition of a committee comprised of members drawn from both chambers. Eventually, the Senate let the House of Representatives have its way.
I do understand that, for every action, sometimes people say there's an equal and opposite reaction for every thesis and antithesis there's a synthesis. But in this case, that's why you need parliamentary intervention, government intervention, so that we don't have things like retaliation. And that's what we discussed here.
Our countries have related with one another historically, and therefore we cannot allow those good relationships that have existed historically to suffer as a result of anything that happens.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Geoffrey Oyema enumerates the efforts of the Foreign Ministry to stem the tide.
The two governments have agreed to set up an early warning unit that would also include civil society, and in particular the Nigerian Union in South Africa. and that my firm belief that with that closing the gap, communication gap between the Nigerian community and South African government, that this mechanism hopefully would address all these issues.
Prior to the 2017 attack on Nigerians in South Africa, there had been various reported attacks that date back to 1994. In 2013, the governments of Nigeria and South Africa signed a memorandum of understanding to reinforce diplomatic ties with the hope of preventing further attacks. The events of 2016 and 2017 have proven that those efforts were in vain. We're joined now in an exclusive chat with a renowned diplomat who sheds more light on Nigeria's global image, its foreign policy, and the diaspora. Ambassador Ayo Olukoni is a career diplomat of over 3 decades experience who has served in various missions abroad, including Kenya, Republic of Seychelles, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Islands. He once served as Deputy Permanent Representative and Acting Permanent Representative of Nigeria to United Nations Environment Programme UNEP and United Nations Human Settlement Programme UN Habitat. He was also the spokesperson of the Nigerian Foreign Ministry between March 2007 and January 2010 before he moved to Vienna, Austria as Minister Child Affairs. Ambassador Ayo Olukoni, thank you for joining us on Global Arena.
Thank you very much. I feel highly honored to be back on Galaxy TV.
Glad to have you come. In an interview you granted a few years ago, you were quoted to have said that Nigeria remains the darling of the world.
Yes.
Now that's strange because the former UK Prime Minister just called us fantastically corrupt. And we also know the perception of the world about Nigeria. Hopefully it's getting better now. But in your experience representing the country on a global stage, what, in your opinion, is the world's perception of Nigeria?
Well, I still believe that as far as Nigeria is concerned, we are indeed up there, in terms of our role in world affairs, for various reasons. For reasons of history, the fact that we are easily the most populous country in Africa, on the African continent, by the fact that we had a large number of Nigerians in the diaspora, professionals in all area, all aspects of our lives, scientists, you have university lecturers in the academia, the world of art and culture. Nigerians stand out wherever they are. The whole question of perception of Nigeria brings to mind the famous TED Talks of Chimamanda about the dangers of a single story. Not all Mexicans are drug peddlers. Not all people from the Nordic states or in those days, are commercial sex workers. So you can't say because a few Nigerians are involved in bad business that all Nigerians are. I will give a positive spin to that and say that indeed, like I said, Nigerians are great world citizens who have proved their mettle and they continue to do so in all aspects of life. I'm lucky to have served in 5 continents across the world. And wherever you go to, you meet Nigerians in the most unlikely places doing very great things.
Would you say that this image of ours has fared better under the Muhammadu Buhari administration?
Certainly. I think the stand of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari to fight corruption, to take on the whole crisis of religious extremism, it's a good plus in terms of the fact that, yes, Nigeria, you have an administration that is standing up to the whole question of the issues of stereotyping Nigerians as a corrupt nation, Nigerians as corrupt. I'm not saying we don't have problems with that. Yes, it is real. We must accept. You first accept and recognize the fact that you have a problem. Then you will tackle it. I think that is what the administration of President Buhari has done very, very for us. And has given us a better image in terms of a country that is ready to confront its problems, especially as far as the whole question of corruption is concerned.
So you also mentioned an experience of yours where Nigerian doctors were tempted to having to have the best bedside manners in
Yes.
Australia.
You came across that.
Let's talk about Nigerians in diaspora and how they are directly affected by our foreign policy vis-a-vis what we have seen played out in South Africa. Incessant xenophobic attack. We also saw some Nigerians being delayed at the airport at the wake of Donald Trump's travel ban. Now, would you say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing well in helping and protecting, the rights of Nigerians living abroad?
Fundamentally, I must say that one of the main tasks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its diplomatic missions abroad is the welfare of Nigerian citizens. That's the number one thing, because the welfare of Nigerian citizens is a primary national interest of Nigeria itself, either within the borders of Nigeria or outside the borders of Nigeria. So let's make that clear. But if you're to protect your nationals abroad, you must do it within the framework of the local laws itself of the respective states, to make sure that at least in case anybody runs foul of the law, you have your day in court. The international minimum standard of treatment is also applicable to the Nigerian national. So the Nigerian missions, of course, across the world, they do that a lot. And of course, we have Nigerians in all parts of the world. And I used to joke that there's only one mosque in Papua New Guinea, which is in Port Moresby. And come to think of it, the chief imam of that mosque is a Nigerian. Wow. Alhaji Mukaila Aziz from Ile Ajofoyinbo in Ibadan. When I saw him, I met him, and I asked him, Alhaji, what are you doing here? I'll say it in Ibadan first and then translate. Evangelization, no need. Alhaji simply responded to say that, yes, we're involved in evangelization here. Chief imam of the only mosque in Nigeria. Also in the same location, we also have some Nigerian churches. Take, for example, the Redeemed Christian Church of God is also there in Papua New Guinea, in Port Moresby. And the pastor is Nigerian, Pastor Nomusi, who is also involved in evangelization as a Christian, in terms of Christian. So that tells you what we're talking about. In Australia, in Western Australia, we have a lot of Nigerians in Western Australia. One of the mainstay of Western Australia is the mining sector, the solid minerals deposit mining in Australia. And a lot of Nigerians are there, either as mining engineers, who are investment bankers in the area of resource development. So that tells you what's Nigeria in terms of the...
But not many of them have also had that kind of a palatable experience. Let's take South Africa, for instance. Aftermath the latest attack on Nigerians and other Africans, Ambassador Dakwa Fafawura was quoted to have said the new wave of xenophobic attacks was perhaps the worst in the long history of attacks on African immigrants by black South Africans. And because of rising tensions, it's not likely to end soon. End of quote. Now, Nigerians are saying that by now we should be talking about severance of diplomatic relations with that part of Africa. But then what we've had is we seem to have a foreign affairs ministry or a government that would rather prioritize economic relations than the welfare of its citizens.
Sometimes even when nations are at war, they don't sever diplomatic relations. Because the whole question of severance of diplomatic relations is at another level altogether. There are stages in terms of expressing your displeasure, in terms of relations between two countries. With specific reference to the South African situation, it's a very unfortunate thing, and it's not only Nigerians that have been the subject of attack. I think the crisis in South Africa is a reflection of the challenges which the post-apartheid South Africa itself is facing. The question of his inability to deliver on the promise of the struggle against apartheid. That's we must understand. The challenges of the South African government to deliver on its promise of a better life, of jobs, of welfare. That is one of the key issues which will lead to that. And then not only that too, you can also say that a new generation of South Africans have now grown up, 1994 up to now. That means a large number of people who were not aware of the role countries like Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and others play in the liberation of South Africa, of the struggle against apartheid.
That's right.
But I must say that, you know, the role countries who were part of the frontline state played is a component part of the struggle against apartheid. The struggle against apartheid itself, it was the South African people that rose against apartheid and fought the struggle. Our efforts were just complementary. We must understand that. So, except people who have a proper understanding of that, they will not. So, we've, of course, in various many ways expressed displeasure in terms of treatment of Nigerians in South Africa. Apart from the usual, there are various levels of representation, a protest note to the Foreign Ministry in terms of treatment of Nigerian nationals. You do send officials. This last time, I think the Foreign Minister himself, first, I think the South African Minister for Immigration or kind of Internal Affairs was in Nigeria to discuss with his counterpart, the Nigerian Foreign Minister, Geoffrey Uenema. And then subsequently, our own Foreign Minister also went to South Africa to discuss with his colleague in terms of how to end this, and also quickly have, you know, an alert in terms of when things are going out of hand. I think dialogue, discussion is a key part of ending such attack in terms of xenophobic attack. But like I said, it's not only Nigerians that are the subject of attack. Maybe because of the number of Nigerians that are there.
They're involved.
As I speak to you on this particular issue, there are hundreds of thousands of Nigerians who are there in South Africa, medical doctors, those of them who are university lecturers, those of them who are involved in consultancy and other places. A large number of those do not feel these. Maybe it's a little bit some of those of our brothers and sisters who are struggling, maybe perhaps on the street, and others that are the subject of attack. I'm not justifying that, but the most important thing is engaging South Africa, the South African government in terms of protection, because under international law, it is the right of the receiving state to say, yes, I admit you to my country to practice or to live in accordance with laws and regulations. Once you do that, there is, like I said, there is what is referred to as the international minimum standard of treatment. That is, you should also treat my nationals as your own national. So that means, of course, you have the duty to protect.
Unfortunately, the narrative concerning the latest attack on Africans in South Africa was different. It was a story of successful Nigerian business people who the indigents there felt were doing better than them. But would you say that the foreign ministry back at home has really done enough, or have they really done their best?
Yes, of course. I mean, the foreign ministry. I mean, one of the primary things for the diplomatic mission, because the diplomatic mission, Nigerian diplomatic mission, takes its cue and direction from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, regularly is in touch with respective missions. We do have two major missions in South Africa. We have in Pretoria, we have in the consulate in, and they're in constant touch with the Home Ministry, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They say, this is the direction you should go, this is what you should do. So that is on. But the whole crisis of migration among countries and things like that has its ebbs and flow. So it's not peculiar to us that we're having this problem with South Africa. Look at the EU and the crisis which they're having among themselves on the question of refugees all across the place, between Italy and other members. You know, there's always some perception in terms of also be done about refugee within the EU itself. So it's not peculiar to us.
You mentioned earlier about how you've met with Nigerians across the world who are doing well, representing us well. There's also we also see the rising number of Nigerians who have been repatriated from different countries of the world. It's said that Nigerians, some of them may not even be guilty of some or most of the alleged offenses. In your opinion, what can be done to facilitate further inquiry into these offenses to determine whether or not there should be a protest against the maltreatment of Nigerians?
What we should start with is to prevent illegal migration of our people. A lot of misperception about young people, especially in terms of the streets of Western Europe or America. You paved with gold, you pick dollars up on the streets. We must disabuse the mind of people. First,
the economic situation is not also helping.
Yes, of course, the economic situation is not helping. But we also do have young Nigerians in the diaspora who finish school, who are back home, who come back home regularly, in terms of establishing businesses, in terms of taking a cue, in terms of what is exactly happening. Look at the creative industry in Nigeria. Look at the media, look at television stations, look at radio stations all across the place. So you have a lot of Nigerians, despite the difficulty in home, they come back home. So the first thing, like I said, is to prevent illegal migration. I serve as spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry and Director of Public Communication. And I think about 2009, we held a national conference on dangers of illegal migration, in which we invited people from the respective states. Because there are profiles in terms of our nationals, who go to Italy, those of them who are in Europe, those of them who are in Austria, those of them who are lured into all sorts of things, trafficking in persons, trafficking in women. So the first time is to prevent that, to let people know. And we did that in terms of that. But yet people are still lured out. The question of migration has always been an eternal an issue historically, in history of the human race, of civilization. I just came myself in Australia. Australia was established by convicts, people who were out there, and established the country itself. If you look at America itself, the Statue of Liberty is a reflection of migrants coming in to establish the U.S. itself. So it's not new. It's only in terms of the context in which things are taking place. And that's why, especially difficulties which countries are facing, that's why people are always saying that, look, it's these foreigners that are taking our jobs. And so we must understand that. Recently, just a few days ago, you heard what happened. The EU is giving a lot of money in terms of, with ECOWAS, because they're looking at it from the perspective of who are the refugees streaming in from Africa into Europe. Most of them are from the ECOWAS state. And so the support to ECOWAS is to be able to take grip of this crisis of illegal migration of young people. But of course, the other side of the point is what you have said, that indeed we also need to work hard to ensure that our young people are provided with jobs, employment, opportunities at home. Then when people want to go migrate, it's either they migrate as professionals. Because as I speak to you, Canada is opening its doors to professionals. That's right. The United States regularly has its visa lottery thing. If you want to migrate to Australia, you migrate as a professionals. And Nigerians are still migrating. Either medical doctors, lawyers, engineers. So the question of migration is a permanent feature of international relations among areas.
Have we seen the body language on the part of government leadership in Africa, understanding this as a regional challenge, declaring some sort of emergency to providing better quality of life to young Africans? Perhaps it will also help the migrant crisis.
You may be aware that at the level of the AU, the African Union itself, there is a migration debate, policy, framework in terms of how to deal with it. So that is an indication that as a continent, our leaders at the highest political level have recognized that, and they have that. And the other flip side of it is the diaspora dimension. That we not only recognize the problem, how do we cope with the problem of illegal migrants from Africa out of the place, but we also recognize that we have a lot of African professionals in the so there's a migration and development narrative. That the narrative as far as migration is concerned is to look at it from the perspective of migration and development. So that means you tap into the diaspora to be able to see. And I worked closely on that when I was in Australia, in terms of encouraging Nigerian nationals, if they don't come back, we're not saying relocating, but actually provide some kind of support from your professionals. There is the AMPA Association of Nigerian Physicians in America. They come regularly home in here to support our hospital, medical missions. A lot of that happens. I was in Owerri the other time. There's a non-governmental organization, NGO, set up by a friend of ours, one of Nigerians, Dr. Obin Ogu, Everose Health and Education Foundation. So this is the dimension, this is the context in which we should look at. Luckily, I'm happy now that the national bill establishment of diaspora commission has been established, and there is a national policy on the diaspora as well, which is still in the works in terms of how do we tap into the Nigerian diaspora to support development at home.
There's an issue of rivalry among policymakers. We saw what played out between the senior special assistant to the president on foreign and diaspora affairs and the Minister of Foreign Affairs when they were talking about xenophobic attack, when certain Nigerians were not allowed into the United States. It was an issue of who really is the spokesperson for government, and the idea of if indeed we have a coordination ongoing between the presidency and the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, of course, occasionally things like this does happen. And it's not only between foreign affairs.
It has happened more than once now.
It's not only between with the foreign affairs. Don't be surprised if the Minister of Health and the National Director and the National Agency for Coalition of AIDS occasionally have brickbat. Don't be surprised if occasionally the Ministry of Labour or the Minister of Labour and NAPTIP have, occasional, here and there. It does happen. But I don't think it's a permanent feature of our foreign policy or implementation of our foreign policy. The special advisor, wherever they are, either on international relations, we do also have special assistants on specific areas in terms of the diaspora, which is component part of it. They all work closely together. Occasionally you have things like that, but it's not a permanent feature of the implementation of our foreign policy. And I think sometimes situation does bring about such things like that. And once people see that, yes, I've crossed the boundary here and there, the most important thing is how they can, come back to realign their positions and work together as a team.
Ambassador Ayo Olukone, thank you very much for joining us on Global Arena.
Yeah, thank you very much. I say honor to be here. It is said that communication impacts on all area of development, and I think media and communication outfit like yours, Galaxy, are doing a great job in this particular area. Keep it up.
Thank you so much for your kind words. That's our show this week on Global Arena. The conversation continues on social media, and I'll be back next week, God willing, with another edition. Until then, keep supporting an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Bye for now.